Continuing completed classics. Fulfilling failed franchises. Reinvigorating reviled rehashes. It's the follow-up Showdown. Do it over October.
Hiya uppers and heya downers. Welcome to the follow-up Showdown to Nerds in Quarantine, where we continue to give worthy second chapters to stories that don't have them. I am your host, Paul Getz. With me are my co-hosts, Travis McMaster and Lauren Picorni. How are you guys?
Hi, Ale.
Hello.
Sorry.
Hello.
Travis is maybe having a stroke. Lauren seems fine. If this is the first time you're joining us, the way it works is we take a movie with either no sequel or a sequel that doesn't live up to the first one, and each try our hand at coming up with a better one. And on our favorite episodes, we do this with a guest. Today, that guest is none other than my cousin and the owner of Great Stone Coffee in Lake of the Ozarks, more specifically Osage Beach, Missouri, on the way to Margaritaville. If you see the giant coffee cup, you can't miss it. His name is Will Runyon Jr. Hey, Will, how's it going?
It's great. Going great, Paul. Happy to be here.
Good. Yeah, happy to have you. This is actually the first time we've actually spoken since perhaps a family gathering. So thank you for coming to a part of my life that is not about family necessarily.
Noted. I've been enjoying it, though. I've been listening since the beginning.
You might be the only one, but it is still very much appreciated. The movie that we are doing today is 1989's The Fly 2, sequel to the 1986 David Cronenberg body horror sci-fi film, The Fly. I believe this was your suggestion, right, Will? Or this is the one that you picked from the list?
Yes. Well, yeah, it was my suggestion. I don't think I ever actually got the list. Over the last year or so, I've been doing like a Cronenberg marathon, like slow motion marathon, with my girlfriend, because she hasn't seen most of his stuff. But yeah, we've been going chronologically through his movies, and The Fly happened to be the next one on our list, and I thought, well, there's a movie that has a terrible sequel.
Well.
So, Travis, it sounds like you have a differing opinion when it comes to The Fly 2.
Yes. Well, one of the reasons I was so excited to do this episode is when I got the word from you that Will had chosen The Fly 2. I had just a few weeks earlier I'd got The Fly 2 on DVD just because I wanted to watch it. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to this probably knows by now, you can't really find it streaming anywhere. So, I'd ordered the DVD and was very excited. I did not have an end to this story prepared at all. Let me start at the beginning. Well, I said this off mic earlier. I saw The Fly 2 before I saw The Fly. I thought it was The Fly. I saw it like on USA in the 90s sometime back when they would do horror marathons. And I grew up for many years thinking that I had seen The Fly, and when I would describe scenes to people, they kind of stared at me blankly, and I assumed they were the fool. And it wasn't until years later when I saw The Fly that I said, but where's the scene where, all the stuff happens that I remember? And that's how I discovered that there was a sequel to The Fly.
Okay, well, I have some questions about that quote-unquote story you just told. But first, let's get some people caught up in case they haven't seen either movie with 2 Travis McMaster minutes. 2 Travis McMaster minutes!
It's always a highlight.
Common courtesy dictates that we offer the minute to Will. Well, if you'd like to take a crack at the minutes.
Man, well, you know what? Brevity is not one of my strong points. So I think you do such an excellent job. I think it would hurt the show for me to take that from you.
Wow. All right, I'll do it. I'll do my job. All right.
Let me know when you're ready.
Oh, I'm sure I'm ready now.
Okay. And go.
Seth Brundle is a bright young inventor, and he flirts with Gina Davis, a journalist, to come back to his lab to check out his invention, which ends up being 2 teleportation pods, the Brundle pods, that he demonstrates by flirtatiously transporting her stalking through. She wants to write about it. He doesn't want her to write about it. The plot is pretty straightforward from here. He teleports himself in an act of desperation to prove his pods can transport organic matter. A fly gets trapped in the pod with him. The pod fuses his DNA with the fly, and then for the rest of the picture, we basically watch him, Seth Brundle, become Brundlefly as he goes mad and his body turns into that of a fly. And then at the end of the movie, he tries to teleport Gina Davis with him to get her to become like one horrible little family unit as she is pregnant with his child. And things go wrong. He gets half teleported into the pod itself and then requests through pantomime that she shoot him in the head with a shotgun, which she does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
right?
Solid.
Yes, and then there's a second film.
Okay. And then Fly 2.
Right,
so we open with not Gina Davis giving birth to a terrible fly creature, and then she dies because it was not Gina Davis, it was some other actress. And movies are never very nice to women. And then the fly child grows up as property of this corporation that is trying to understand his metamorphosis. They're a genetics corporation. They're also trying to unlock the secrets of these pods, the Brundle pods. Part of this fly baby's deal is that he grows very quickly. So in a matter of months, he turns into a child. In a matter of years, he becomes a man, an Eric Stoltz man. And then Eric Stoltz, as a genius, is put to work trying to uncover how these pods work. He begins his own natural metamorphosis into a fly monster. He wreaks his havoc and revenge on the company and the corporation. Although in a twist, he manages to unmutate himself by successfully teleporting with the CEO of the company in the pods so that he could just remain Eric Stoltz, and then the CEO becomes a horrible monster.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think you went 2 seconds over, but that was so close. I let it slide.
Getting better.
Not bad, not bad.
Justified in my decision.
That's high praise.
A couple things that are maybe worth noting that were not noted are in the first one, Gina Davis has an ex-lover who is her boss, and he is inadvertently the reason that Seth goes through the pods because he's jealous and drunk. Right. Which I think is maybe only worth mentioning because it sort of adds to how tragic it is.
Well, and that character shows up in The Fly too, so that's a great.
Correct. No. He's the only character to show up from 1 to 2, and he's also in my pitch, so had to mention him.
Also in my pitch too.
Yeah, I mean he survived, so I guess stands to reason. Although he does lose a hand and a foot because of burning fly vomit. And then in 2, the only thing that I guess I felt like was left out is he has a girlfriend. And she's nice.
Yeah, but like I said, movies, they didn't... yeah.
She's the lead from Spaceballs. That's where you might remember her from. She's,
Princess Vespa, right?
Vespa.
That's it. That's the one. All right. Well, so then, let's start it off by talking about the first one. What's everybody's experience? What were your thoughts? What do you think? What do you feel? What do you know?
So I had seen it when I was, I was probably too young I was probably 8 or something, like it wasn't long after it had come out when I originally saw it. And I think that's the only time I ever had seen it until, recently. So I had some, and actually, what you were describing earlier, Travis, with your memories of The Fly 2, I was having that experience when I was watching The Fly 1, because I was like, I was waiting for moments that I remembered that I thought were in the first one that weren't. I really I was surprised. I enjoyed it much more than I expected to. I felt like it was a much better production. The quality, some of his stuff, has that low budget kind of feel, right? Like even, I think Videodrome, I think was what he did maybe right before The Fly.
Yes.
And it almost feels like it was shot for TV or something, and this, it felt like a Hollywood movie, and I felt like the performances, everything was just like better, and of course the makeup, the monster effects, that's what they won the Oscar for, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Best makeup. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was amazing. It was, that was pretty cool too. I think it still held up. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I felt it was like a little jarring. I thought way it opened, just with them at the art opening and he's talking.
I was specifically going to compliment this very thing about the movie. It's so rare that you see something like that, where the first shot after a cool credit sequence is you're given a close up of the main character. He's already in a conversation with the other main character. You didn't have to see them meet. You didn't have to see them cross the room to each other. The dynamic is already there and the character's already there in such a major way. I wonder if that was always the opening, but I really couldn't think of anything that would work better, especially given that his first line is, I'm going to change the world.
Well, yeah, and I feel like it really just kept moving from there. Like I don't think there was any point in this movie that dragged that I recall.
I completely agree with you, and that actually in part makes me question both from you and Travis what things from The Fly 2 you were waiting for, only because to me The Fly 2 nothing. I mean, the setup is interesting, but I would say it feels like nothing really happens until the last 20 minutes.
Well, I'm glad you asked.
In which all of the visual stuff that you might remember happens.
Yes. The big thing for me, apart from that like devastating and amazing ending, was the shot of the Fly throwing the security guard at that door and he slams the door shut with the body.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember that was a really effective, creepy, well done effect, the year I saw it when I was a child. And it held up. I was probably confused about the opening because I know Gina Davis had that nightmare in the first one, but it plays out differently in the opening, obviously. So that probably confused me.
Yeah, that's the moment that and we're not concerned about spoiling anything, right?
No, we've had our minutes.
Yes. So. Okay. So the birth nightmare that she has in the first movie, she gives birth to the giant maggot and it's, wiggling around. And in the second movie, I guess, what I was expecting was like this wobbly, like egg thing to come out, like, and then the guy stomps on it. Is that what happens in the second movie?
What happens in the second one is it's like it's a shell essentially that she gives birth to. It's a disgusting slime covered pupa that a then completely healthy normal looking baby hatches out of. Basically, a guy kind of prods it. Yeah, Lauren, was this your first time seeing these movies?
Yes. I want to say that shut up. It was so gross. Like the first one, it really, really grossed me out. All the effects and like the nails coming off, like vomit, effectively very disgusting and off-putting.
Oh, it only gets grosser as it goes, for sure. But the first one I had seen it I think for the first time in college. I have held it in high regard since then, and then upon rewatching it this time, I hold it in even higher regard. I really don't have much bad to say about it. I mean, I got grossed out again, and I was cool with that. I thought that was great. But yeah, I mean, it's so tragic and scary and tense and wonderful, and performances I praise up and down all the livelong day.
Oh yeah. I wanted to say one thing about the effects and the grossness. There's something, that's one thing I love about Cronenberg's stuff is, and it actually reminds me of like Guillermo del Toro, like on his on the Devil's Backbone, like commentary. There's like a part where a guy gets like stabbed in the armpit with a spear, and there's something like you feel it. It's not just getting shot in the bicep, like all the action heroes do. Cronenberg, it's like. There's like a humanity to it. Like he doesn't shy away from it. Like, and like in A History of Violence, he talks in the commentary, he talked about that too. Like he doesn't glorify it. It's all there and it's horrible. But in this movie, like you have that emotional connection to Seth. And and as he's going through this, it's just, it's gut wrenching,
Yeah. And it's pretty great how effectively they make you not just like, in my opinion, but love him in those first 20 or so minutes of the movie, because as soon as his transformation starts, it is so fast and he so quickly becomes monstrous. Like he very quickly jumps off of the hero's arc and into just this sort of tragic freight train to hell. Mm-hmm. And that's why it makes it so effective when you do see moments of humanity from him again. It's so horrific to start, and he pushes Gina Davis right out, that when she sort of hears from him in a way, he's already like doomed. He's already really deep into his process of becoming the Fly. But I was like relieved. I was like it was nice to feel a moment of relief that she gets to hear from her love again. You know,
well, I actually thought that was in some ways more chilling, because to me, and he even sort of has that little speech that says it as much. It felt less like we were meeting Seth or seeing Seth Brundle again, and more like we were meeting Brundlefly, like we had gone past his first, sort of over the hump kind of jittery transformation process. And that was sort of like, you could read that as Seth Brundle dying. And then the calm sort of like scary looking thriller-esque monster is Brundlefly, and that's why he's being sort of like, but Frankenstein being a polite, well-spoken creature.
Yeah, and I'll just say as well, like I thought I was really amazed by his performance. Like everybody loves Jeff Goldblum, right? But I can't think of anything that I felt like was like a great acting performance. He just kind of does what he does, right? I hear you. Yeah. And I love him. I mean, he does. Yeah, he's great. He elevates whatever he's in. I'd say, it seems like, but in this, it was a truly great performance. Like, I mean, just like that whole transformation. I mean, the physical tics and the way it fed out over the course of the movie. It just seemed like his progression or his disintegration was just perfect.
Such a distinct and immediately recognizable character. Like, he is charming and he is handsome, but as soon as you see and meet Seth Brundle, you also understand that he is socially strange, that he's a loner, that he essentially wears his whole self on his sleeve. I feel like you get that from shot one, moment one. This is a good transition into my actors' notes, because there are some interesting ones here. I could not picture it with anybody but Jeff Goldblum, and there were a lot of actors that auditioned for it. But before he got it, it was offered to the following 4 actors. First, Michael Keaton, who apparently every movie in the mid-'80s wanted. We're trying to find out.
Yeah.
Mel Gibson, who turned it down for Lethal Weapon. James Woods, and Richard Dreyfuss.
Huh.
Whoa, really?
I actually think everyone except for James Woods would have killed that role too.
I was kind of hoping Lithgow was going to be on that list.
He auditioned.
Oh,
look at me.
No. Also considered were Willem Dafoe and John Travolta. But Willem Dafoe is the only one on that whole list that I don't know, that brings
already has a monster face.
Yeah, I guess so, because I guess that is part of it. And apparently when it comes to Jeff Goldblum's face, the makeup effects people, the character crew, they were a little bit upset at his casting because they thought his face would be too hard to work with.
He's too pretty.
Which is interesting. Yeah, I mean, because he is handsome, but he's an odd, offbeat kind of handsome. Yeah, for sure. He's got the big eyes, and
like he's even more striking younger. It's insane. Like I couldn't stop looking at him.
So Veronica was offered originally to Linda Hamilton, who David Cronenberg just loved in The Terminator, but she turned it down because the script disturbed her. Yeah, and then Jennifer Jason Leigh and Laura Dern were both considered, but it ultimately went to Gina Davis when Jeff Goldblum, who was dating her at the time, suggested her. And then she killed the audition. It wasn't just that. She killed the audition.
One thing I might throw in, speaking of that sort of thing, so I felt like the romance thing was, it was effective in a way. The tragedy was there, but I did not feel a lot of chemistry between them. What did you guys think about that?
I agree. I didn't. It felt sterile, cold.
Yeah,
interesting.
I sort
insect
of like.
Oh boy.
Between the two of them, is he is attractive and charming enough that she followed him back, and then almost immediately she sees this amazing invention. Obviously, that's what she's going to care about more. And then when she starts to fall for him, he immediately turns into a lunatic. So I took any lack of chemistry that you guys might have picked on just to read as like, she doesn't know him that well, and then he turns into a monster.
I would say that I did feel chemistry, but at the same time, the connection that they share is a connection between a character. The character she's playing is very used to relationships, sort of very mature about relationships, and he is the opposite. So I feel like that is what is intriguing her to some extent, along with everything else. So I could see it reading any number of different ways.
So like there's like the sex scene that they had, and Jeff Goldblum, he's like doing this like weird like heavy panting thing the whole time, and I was thinking, is he like a virgin? Like, is this like it seemed like an odd choice to me.
I felt like what I got from him in terms of that was that because he to some extent had enough charm to talk her into coming back and seeing the invention. And because of a line that he says later on when he says, "Are we having a romance?" I think that he is probably used to casual sex or sex that doesn't lead further. That would be my guess about Seth Brundle. But okay, well, so jumping back a little to some writer and director's notes about the first one. It was originally offered to Tim Burton, who turned it down. And then Robert Bierman was at the helm of the film, but had to leave because of the tragic death of his daughter. And this was, I thought, really, really cool. Mel Brooks produced this movie. He actually produced both movies, The Fly and The Fly 2. But he took his name off because he didn't want people to not take it seriously. And he came up with the tagline, "Be afraid, be very afraid."
I can hear it in his voice now.
Really funny to me that the tagline for The Fly 2 is "Be afraid, be very, very afraid."
Oh, was that the tagline? Oh.
Yeah. Which
I take back anything negative I ever said about it.
I have to say, it's not scarier. Like it or not, it is not a scarier film than the first. So incorrect in its use of tagline.
Yeah.
Anything anybody else wants to say about the first one?
I would just want to circle back and revisit Gina Davis for a moment, because the Cronenberg effects and Jeff Goldblum get so much attention for the movie, as well they should. But Gina does, what she does very well too. And I think she has a really challenging character tightrope to walk in this movie, where she's sort of interested in Seth Brundle, but also doesn't know him. And then he kind of goes crazy, but she's compassionate, so she wants to help him. And then she's stuck going to her horrible ex-husband boss for help. And I just think she does a really good job of threading that needle.
He's not her ex-husband, but he is.
Ex-husband?
You did, yeah.
He's her ex-boyfriend, and former college professor, so creepy. But
that works for his character, though.
I read it differently. I don't read her feelings on Jeff Goldblum as being anything less than very deep. I don't think that it's a flirtation that she then goes back because of compassion. I read it as love. Romeo and Juliet type of love, where it's it's a powerful connection.
The power of love. I like what you're saying. It reads very like monster movie to me, like King Kong or Twilight or whatever, where they just have that really intense, almost like fairy tale, capital R, capital L romance love.
Well, and, add that also, along with everything else, adds to the tragedy of the situation. They were very close to something that would have been very, very special, and only because of a slight misunderstanding.
For want of one teleportation accident. Yes. Go I.
While we're handing out credit, I think John Getz as her creepy ex-boyfriend, Stathis Borans, which is such a hard name to remember.
Sounds like a Game of Thrones name.
Yeah.
I gotta say, flag on the play. I think Paul's only backing this dude because they got the same last name. Well, I think this is biased.
First of all, his doesn't have an O. His doesn't have a silent O like mine. But despite I think he does give a good performance, what I like more about that character than what the actor does with it is that you don't often see an arc in which someone so successfully plays a creep and a jerk and a guy who from the beginning you could read as, oh, this is going to be the guy that causes the trouble, essentially gets to be the hero in the end. I mean, he's not the hero, but he is a hero.
I mean, he was basically kind of an abusive stalker.
Yes.
And I didn't really like the fact that he kind of came back to kind of be the, I mean, he saved the day. I mean, she would have been killed or transformed if not for him showing up.
He does suffer. You know, I mean,
Yes.
like in that scene, I didn't fully remember what happened from when I last saw it. So I was like, oh, he's probably going to die. Where the fly is vomiting and taking off his hand and foot. Yeah, it's disgusting and disturbing, but it's also one of those like, oh yeah, jerk. There you go. There you go, pal.
Right.
All right. Well, moving ahead into The Fly 2. It was written by Mick Garris. He was one of four writers. This went through a series of revisions. Mick Garris, who wrote Critters 2, Hocus Pocus, and the story for Batteries Not Included, among several other things. Other writers on this were Jim Wheat and his brother Ken Wheat, who wrote Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and also Pitch Black. Some good credits there. And then the final writer credited with punching this thing up was Frank Darabont, most famous for his Stephen King work, Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, The Mist. Travis, you mentioned the other day you're a fan of this. He also wrote the Blob remake.
Hey!
And finally, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. So you had some heavy hitters on this script. That being said, I'm not sure what happened.
They made the script, Paul. They had this great script, and then they made it into a movie, and we all enjoyed it.
Will, I know you've listened to the podcast. I'm not sure how many of Travis's opinions have been against the grain, but it's not uncommon. Also, I don't know what Lauren's opinion is here, so I don't want to speak for her too early.
On The Fly 2, I liked it more than I was expecting. I was surprised by how well Eric Stoltz did.
Whoa.
For some reason. I don't know. I don't know why I say that. I thought he did really well in the role. It wasn't my favorite, but it was still a fine sequel, I thought.
Okay. I'm definitely going to agree with you on the Eric Stoltz of it all. I thought he did well. What I found intriguing about his performance and his character was more he's 5 years old of it all than the Fly stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't think he really brought anything to the Fly.
That's a great point, Paul. This movie is interesting because it has some other sci-fi concepts going. It doesn't rest on the Fly like it's the only thing it's got going on. Mm-hmm. Good point. It does do a lot of other interesting things.
That's what I said, huh? Okay.
I think it is. It's usually kind of popularly considered an inferior movie, right? That was just kind of my impression of it.
25% on Rotten Tomatoes in comparison to The Fly's 92.
Yeah, but who are these people on Rotten Tomatoes who rated it? Rotten Tomatoes can fucking brundle off.
I saw it at a slumber party when I was like in 4th grade or something, and then we played Battletoads all night.
Oh, that sounds like the best way to see that movie.
Yeah, I do have positive associations with it, really, personally.
I mean, all of my jackassery aside, I do think it is a really good movie. I think maybe, like, of course it's maybe not going to be as good as the first one, but the first one was made by, a pretty big-time filmmaker who's got quite a collection under his belt with an all-star cast. I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't mean it's not good to say it's not as good as The Fly.
I'm not going to be too mean to it as I have to others. I would say, unlike Lauren, I liked it less than I anticipated. I was pretty excited, to be honest. And especially when it started, I was like, oh, you're playing with all these interesting concepts. And I will say probably about up through when he goes in and pets the mutated dog, which was a wonderfully sad scene. I was pretty on board. And then I was just bored. And I didn't mean to lead into that pun so seamlessly, but hey, here we are. Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of felt like I was waiting for something to be interesting again until the violence sequence, which was cool. Some cool violence. I mean, like, what took away from that part of it is I didn't like the way the fly looked. And it looked more like a Dark Crystal character.
Sure.
Than a fly.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I also coming so soon off of The Fly, in which it's hard for me to think of other movies where the effects are so effective. And this one, I felt like they didn't build on the reveal of the effects in this movie like they did the first one. Really, I thought the best stuff was the gore.
That guy's face melting off, but he's still alive.
Oof. That's the best moment in the whole movie, in my opinion.
The first movie, it was trying to be something, and the second movie was kind of just trying to be a sci-fi movie. You know, I feel
like what you might be driving at is the first movie feels like it could, on another level, it could be about our fear of like cancer. You know, your body can just turn against you and there's nothing you can do as you just deteriorate. It could be seen as, I don't know, a parable for the warnings of going home with strange men, any number of things. Whereas The Fly 2 does feel a little bit more like you said, like a science fiction movie, trying as hard as it can to just jump into a third act where an elevator smashes a guy's head.
Another thing that I was going to say bothered me. Well, it did bother me. Once he becomes the Fly, he's still himself. He can't speak anymore, but he is the one making all the decisions. He decides to be kind and pet the dog. There is no threat of him becoming an actual monster. He just becomes a fly, but he's still Martin Brundle, the Fly.
Well, I would first point out that he was born fly monster. So he might, it sells to me that he would retain whatever of his consciousness. I would also argue that just personally, for me, turning into that fly monster is enough of a threat to drive the horror home.
It's just there's not much threat. It's almost like a different genre. It's certainly a different kind of story. It's not a tragedy, really.
I was surprised that it has such a happy ending.
Well, and my issue with that happy ending is that I feel like the science, while you can poke holes in it in the first one, it's pretty consistent. And in this one, it ultimately works out that because he gets in the machine he's transformed from a human being into a sort of like cocooned, deteriorating creature that kind of looks like the first fly. Then he breaks out of it, is a full, completely different looking, weird fly creature. And then that fly creature gets into a machine with a human being. And when they come out, the other human being has turned into a mutated pile of horror, and he is a perfectly intact Eric Stoltz wrapped up in goo.
I will agree with you that science, I'll cop to that doesn't quite mathematically add up for me either. I'll give it one more because it gives you that really satisfying ending.
I do like
with the monster mash in the tube and the.
And one thing that just popped into my head, a line that I forgot was even from this movie that like recurs to me every now and then is, I just remember she says, "You're getting worse." And he says, "I'm getting better."
Yeah. He's laying on the couch forming with cobwebs all over him.
Same.
That's one of the parts I thought he did best at. I thought he really nailed that part.
Well, and here is a problem I have with that. Not to say his performance, I agree. He does a great job in that scene. But in that scene, I think it's implied that the fly is taking over and it's messing with his mind. Yet, when he fully transitions into the fly creature, he is, like I said, essentially able to walk around pretty in control.
I would also like to remind the court that he melts people's faces in that state. He's murdering people and throwing people.
But they're evil people. First of all, I think a problem is it's got too many characters, whereas the first one keeps it pretty tight. But all of the characters, except for the main two and the dog, are evil. It would have made, I think, a big difference in the movie if not every single scientist was on Team Evil. I guess there was that one nice scientist that the security guard accidentally kills. But Otherwise, every single scientist is nasty and mean to Martin for no reason, and it's just
those two hate him.
It's just like from the beginning, there's no question, there's no complexity in terms of anyone's relationships. It's like literally just like, well, these are the bad guys.
I'll allow it.
The fact that is not nearly as effects. There's not as much of a build in the effects, and it's not an effects-heavy movie, is kind of interesting to me because the director of this movie is Chris Wallace, who did the creature effects for The Fly. He was the head of the creature effects team, and apparently he did The Fly in lieu of doing Gremlins 2, and was the head of special effects department on Gremlins and Return of the Jedi. So this is an effects guy. That was one thing that surprised me about The Fly 2 being less in the way of effects than I anticipated.
I will say, the first Fly gets a lot more flashy monster makeup effects, whereas The Fly 2 has a lot of complicated, that third act violence took quite a bit of doing.
Before we move off of The Fly 2, I just have some actors' notes. Gina Davis refused to appear in the movie because her character is killed in the first scene.
Of course.
Martin Brundle was written specifically for Eric Stoltz, but he refused because he didn't like the script. Then it was offered to Keanu Reeves, who turned it down. Then Vincent D'Onofrio was cast, but his screen test played poorly. He was sort of like Eric Stoltz in Back to the Future out.
Gotcha.
Of the movie, and then they did a punch up of the script and brought Eric Stoltz back in.
Well, it worked. It paid off.
Yeah, he did well.
He's good in all things.
Yeah, except for Back to the Future, apparently.
He was good as recently as last year.
Oh, Her Smell.
Her Smell.
Right, with Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah. Did you see Her Smell?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good, right?
Yeah.
Did you hear that,
I
Lauren?
think actually, you know what? I was watching it with my girlfriend, and she did not seem to enjoy it. And we never finished it. But I did watch like the first hour and 15 minutes of it.
Join us next week on the Her Smell show, where some people who have seen it and some people who haven't continue to sort of talk about Her Smell.
I'm in the middle.
Well, that makes you the perfect guest.
Ooh.
Okay, well, before we get into the pitches, a couple of other sequels to reference that exist or could have existed. First of all, a proposed sequel to The Fly, which was sanctioned by Cronenberg, would have been about Seth Brundle somehow being kept alive inside of the telepods, like inside of the computer program. And it would have been about Bartok Sciences keeping him a captive slave working for them. He communicates with Veronica through a computer, and the two of them find a way to exact brutally violent revenge on the Bartok folk and bring Seth back into his original body.
That's interesting.
And then apparently another sequel that was proposed before The Fly 2 happened, that went into pre-production but never took off, was to be directed by Gina Davis's then husband, Rennie Harlan, and it was called Flies. And it was about Veronica giving birth to Seth's twin boys.
Oh.
Ah.
Yeah.
So I have a question I can't remember the answer to. At the end of The Fly 2, is the Bartok Corporation still a thing?
Yes.
I guess so, because he's the Bartok himself is in the cage or whatever you would call it that the dog is in. Looks like a silo. Almost.
Yeah.
They're just keeping their mistakes alive. That's what they're about at the end.
Aren't we all?
Okay, so then the final other sequel was a comic book sequel to The Fly 2 called The Fly Outbreak, which was published in 2015, and it follows Martin Brundle as he attempts to cure Bartok of his mutant condition.
Oh.
Which...
Nerd.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would write that. Who cares? So then rolling toward the pitches with our questions, numero uno, should this movie, The Fly, have a sequel?
Hell yeah.
Sure, yeah.
I'm happy with the ending there, and though, yeah. No, I'll stick with that. No.
Yeah, I'm gonna come in as a no as well. Only because, I mean, I understand that there are seeds planted. There's the possibility of a Brundlefly child. There is also the evil, well, I guess you don't know that they're evil. There's the corporation out there that they've mentioned.
I can assume. Greedy scientists. I would say,
I mean, it's just such a perfectly intact tragedy, and it's so much about Seth Brundle that I don't know what could satisfy.
The implications of teleporter technology being feasible, even if it's non-organic matter, if you can only transport inorganic matter. There's so many stories you could tell with just that, without even getting into like fly stuff or genetic stuff or monster stuff, that there's a glut of sequels you could pitch.
I could agree. I agree with that, but I would see it more almost like an anthology rather than a sequel, like maybe within the same world. Like you said, there are a lot of interesting elements, a lot of directions you can go, but I feel like The Fly, this story, it died with Seth, like he was the heart of it. So I'd say you could move on, talk about Bartok, talk about the technology, and maybe even track down Gina Davis and her baby. Yeah.
So if you do that, I would say it's a sequel. But if you leave that alone, you call it a sidequel, as Soldier is to the Blade Runner universe.
Paralleliquel.
Huh.
Ah, yes.
That was the term.
Yes, we coined that on our S. Darko episode. Well, real quick before we transition into pitches, gotta ask, sequel or prequel? If you're gonna do it, what's the sweet spot?
Oh, it's gotta be a sequel.
Yeah, it's gotta be.
I don't see how you can do a prequel.
Is that just like Jeff Goldblum writing math down?
Or Gina Davis sleeping with her professor? Yeah.
She's upset about it because he's a jerk.
Her getting out of an abusive relationship, but still working for/with him. Weird.
I mean, I would watch that movie. That sounds complicated. It's not like a science fiction movie, but there's some stuff to talk about there.
Yeah, but that could be a short. Okay, so Will, why don't we just start with you?
Okay.
Maybe a few more flowers first. I mean, it's a little too early to go in.
So we open again with the delivery room scene, a version of it. And it's it's a very suspenseful, very tense scene. And there's, ominous music, something wrong is happening. She's kind of looking around and suddenly notices that her wrists are bound, to the bed. And she starts to, get even more frantic and, why am I tied up? She doesn't even know why she's here, what's going on. And the doctor emerges and it is Seth. It's Jeff Goldblum return. And suddenly you also notice behind him is one of the teleport pods. And he's just, in his kind of creepy semi-Seth voice, she's coming, Then we kind of cut to Seth's POV where he's looking at the woman and we see that it's not Gina Davis. It's Tawny, the woman from the bar that Seth picked up after the arm wrestling. She recognizes him in that moment and, what are you doing to me? It's just, he kind of ignores her, goes back to work, while she's screaming in pain. And finally, the birth happens. The baby emerges, but we can't see it. She's sobbing and he's just kind of ignoring her, muttering that she's so beautiful, so beautiful. And then whips around, the pod pops open, the fog starts rolling out. He turns, walks to the pod. She's screaming, struggling, kneels down, puts the baby in the pod, and steps back. And then we see the baby for the first time, cut to the baby, and in a flash, it's just a normal baby sitting there, and in a flash, it disappears, it's teleported. She wakes up. Tawny wakes up in bed. It was a nightmare. She runs to the bathroom to throw up, sitting on the floor next to the toilet. She has a moment of realization and says, shit. Cut to Tawny at the drugstore, buying a pregnancy test. Okay, now Seth's warehouse later on, there's police tape, but it seems vacant. She kind of, goes under the police tape. She goes in. She's kind of curious what's going on. Obviously something happened, but she has some business to, take up with Seth. So she's banging on the door, calling out to him. Nobody answers. She opens the door, peeks inside. It's a mess, of course. Goes in, starts looking around in, kind of a classic 80s move. A guy comes out, like a guy kind of in a hazmat suit, but with his hood kind of off. Comes walking out like eating like a ham sandwich. He's like, what are you doing here? You aren't supposed to be here. They tell her to leave and she's kind of resistant to leave, assuming that Seth is still there. She kind of calls out and they're kind of pushing her toward the door and she says something about, well, tell him, that we have to do something about this baby. And as she like gets to the door, she's met by a guy in a suit who introduces himself as Dr. Weber. And he tells her that he'll take her to see Seth. Mm-hmm. So then we cut to Gina Davis. Well, she's a reporter, so she wants to get this story out, and has, of course, the personal connection, but she's being blocked by someone. And there appears to be some kind of a threat, and then the phone goes dead. She slams it down. She's upset. Her ex-boyfriend, ex-boss guy comes in. He's in a wheelchair. Clearly, this is a thing that's been going on for a while. She, says, I don't want to hear it. And he has kind of a, you just got to let it go. We both lost something here. We've got to move on. And he's kind of sets up, it's the Bartok company. They're too big. They control the media. They have people in the government. The official story is that it was like a murder-suicide attempt. And obviously she is, traumatized by it. And he just wants her to take some more time, work through it. He's very insensitive about it. Either go home and get over it, or, you might as well leave. And she's like, fine, I'm out of here. He's calling somebody, she's got proof, she's got videotape, you don't hear the other side. But again, it kind of seems to end with, basically it's Dr. Weber again, he's the evil mastermind on the other side of the phone. And he makes kind of a threat about, well, she can't be allowed to, have this information, or, we have to do something about her. She kind of has like a PTSD panic attack kind of episode. She hasn't really been out much since the events, and it's been a little while. Yeah. And this may be the first time she's been out in public, since. And, I thought you could go, I don't know. I had, there's like a dangling fly paper there, with a buzzing fly on it. And there's like a waiter that kind of looks like Jeff Goldblum or whatever, So she's triggered and she has to take off early. She gets home and the door to her apartment is ajar. The place is ransacked, kind of clicks, and she immediately goes and sees that all the tapes have been stolen. And her papers are everywhere. And she, it could be kind of a jump scare where the other guy, he's there, in the wheelchair, and he's like barely hanging on to life. He's been beaten badly, and he's just moaning and kind of semi-conscious or unconscious. He's conscious enough to like come into the room, and then he just sort of collapses, and she calls the police, cut to the hospital. He's, got tubes and, assisted breathing and, intensive care. Also, while she was at the hospital, she starts kind of holding her stomach. She's clearly, starting to have some pain. The next morning, Tawny, the lady from the bar, she is in the Bartok facility. She's being taken care of. She's, all the nurses tend to her every need. It's pretty luxurious, I guess, but we find out she's unhappy. She's not allowed to leave. Dr. Weber comes in, sweet talks her, but with a very kind of abusive edge. He's not just an evil mastermind. He's he's not above getting his hands dirty. So, and that's why she can't leave, but she's content enough to stay because they're taking care of her. Okay. Same day we see Gina Davis, going back to the magazine office. She knows, has hit a brick wall. She starts to leave, doubles over in pain. They call an ambulance. She's taken to the hospital, being wheeled down the hall. She tells them she's pregnant. For some reason, she has decided to keep it. That's where that decision becomes clear that she is planning to keep it. Mm-hmm. They take her to kind of a secluded part of the hospital. This is where it starts getting strange, but she doesn't seem to notice. She's in so much pain and that sort of thing. The nurses, the people that are wheeling her in, leave, and, the doctor will be right with you. She's kind of concerned, but can't really do anything about it. And a few minutes later, Dr. Weber comes in. They do kind of an exam, maybe an ultrasound, some kind of, grainy. It's hard to tell what exactly he's seeing, but he's very fascinated by it. And it's actually appears to be very healthy and growing very quickly. There's like a little montage of her admittance and some testing. Oh, and also you kind of recognize subtly that this appears to be the same facility that Tawny's in. And she actually, and some time passes, she actually catches a glimpse of Tawny in the hallway one day just kind of going from room to room. Maybe she sees her in a room, or so she, she ends up being locked in. They won't let her out. She devises a way to escape. She's escaping, but as she's leaving, she sees like mysterious trucks coming in or something. And, and the reporter in her will not let her, ignore it. So she has to go like do a little bit of investigation. She discovers like a containment facility with a bunch of the teleportation pods, but it's not just the teleportation pods that existed in the lab before. It's variations on them, smaller ones, bigger ones. And there are like weird things like chimera, mutated animals in cages, and she gets captured again. Somehow they try to get Tawny. And I wanted there to be like a conflict where she's trying to get Tawny out of there, save her. And, but Tawny wants to stay because they are treating her pretty well, and, they're going to buy the baby. She didn't want it anyway. And she, of course, probably gets killed because they don't care about her and just wanted the baby. And I don't know how they would end up bringing it down in the end, or if they would. Like by the end of the movie, the baby still isn't born.
Oh, wow.
It's like it goes on to eventually, the third or fourth movie is Planet of the Flies kind of thing.
Okay.
I got it.
That's kind
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It really gets rolling there later on. I didn't get to the really fun stuff.
Well, what's it? Do you have a title?
No, not really. Planet of the Flies. Yeah. Or it could be like Journey to the Planet of the Flies or something, because it's not the Planet of the Flies yet, but it's, yes. By the end of the movie, it's clear there's going to be like
Rise of the Planet of the Flies.
Dawn of the Planet of the Flies is,
Rise of the Flies.
It's amazing.
Lord of the Fly.
Oh,
Singular.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, does Dr. Weber live beyond the movie?
Oh, no. Yeah, I think so. Because, so he is just an agent for Bartok. Maybe they do sort of take down Bartok, but he kind of jettisons himself with some of the technology. Because he's the Moriarty. What's the James Bond version of that? Blofeld, yeah.
First, it's hard for me to not picture Dr. Weber as Dr. Brenner from Stranger Things, just because he's such a similar role to play. But I do have a suggestion for the casting on Dr. Weber, which would be Scott Glenn, who plays Jack Crawford in Silence of the Lambs.
Oh.
I just looked him up. I like it.
Right on.
Bringing Tawny back.
Yeah, that was cool. That's super cool.
Thread to pull.
Yeah, that was my, watching the movie, I was like, oh, well, she just disappears. Where did she go? I want to see that was
cool. That opening was awesome. That was really, really cool.
Thank you, yeah. That's where I put most of my energy. As you may have been able to tell.
Like more of a thriller vibe.
There's, the mysterious organization that is pulling strings that you don't even realize, and you can't trust anyone, and your sanity is even, questionable.
Yeah.
Like naked.
So I really wanted to get into that. Oh yeah. 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 There you go.
All right. Well, awesome. I'm gonna pull a Man from U.N.C.L.E. episode and break these pitches up with some fun facts.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
Lead us.
So my first fun fact is that Vincent Price apparently revealed in an interview that when the remake was released, Jeff Goldblum wrote him a letter saying, "I hope you like it as much as I liked yours." Price responded after seeing the movie with the letter. Okay. Goldblum or Price? I guess I'll try both. Okay, so Goldblum said, "I hope you like it as much as I liked yours." And then Price's reply was, "Yeah, not great." But Price's reply was, "Oh boy, he's tough. Finish it, Flavisham." Hold on. Okay, that is not what he said. Wonderful. Right up to a certain point. No, I'm terrible at this. I'm not going to do it.
That was good.
No, Paul's right. That was
anyways, his reply was wonderful right up to a certain point. It went a little too far. So
he's from a different time.
2 weeks old.
Yeah. All right. Anyone want to go next?
I'll go next.
All right.
Dive right in.
Corny's got it. You want me to hold your book?
I think the world should know about it now, and I think I should be the one to tell it.
On the brink of the new millennium, the Bartok Corporation is preparing to release their successfully revamped Brundle pods for worldwide distribution. The dozens of test subjects who made the success of the Grundle pods possible, I said Grundle pods.
Wow.
Suffering from varying degrees of mutation, the subjects successfully mount a long, planned escape. As they escape, they manage to retrieve a number of relevant files, including those of Seth and Martin Brundle. After securing refuge, the subjects read their files and learn about Martin Brundle's successful reversal of his mutation. They track down and confront Martin, who is disgusted by the Bartok Corporation's methods and agrees to help the subjects take it down. Martin suggests that they gather all of the subjects and go together to the Bartok Corporation to help handle security. And so they break into the facility. Security shows up, and Martin scolds them for letting the subjects escape in the first place. He has been helping them develop the pods this whole time. Seems when you bond with a CEO, you keep that ruthlessness.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. A number of the test subjects reveal that they have bombs strapped to them and detonate them, leveling the facility and all and everything in it. From a distance, we see the facility billowing smoke. 4 test subjects look on somberly. A fly lands on the camera and flies away after a moment. And that's all I got. And it's called The Fly 2000.
So this is
right before.
This is The Fly 3, essentially.
Yeah.
It
That's true.
incorporates
The Fly 3, 2000.
Yeah. Very cool.
Oh, I just wanted to say I really like him retaining some of the traits of the CEO.
Super cool.
Because that's something we haven't seen yet. I'd like to explore that.
That is an interesting play with the science. And I did I wanted to know what would happen had things gone forward with Gina Davis and Brundlefly merging. Probably a monstrosity, but perhaps not at first, much like Brundlefly himself. Probably.
And that would be fascinating. I'd like to see that.
I am surprised so far. No flies so far. I mean,
well, that seems like a good segue to my pitch then.
Take it away, Travis.
Oh, okay.
Let me think about it. I'll come up with something.
I'm going to describe for you the opening scene. We're going to start with a lot of videotaped interviews from people from this movie. Anyone who is left alive still, any tertiary characters, really intensive, FBI style interrogation, just little flashes and snippets, as we're also going to be intercutting with CSI or federal investigators at the site of Seth Brundle's, horrible accident. As they're sort of cleaning things up, they're putting things in bags, they're boxing it up, kind of like the Ark of the Covenant in the warehouse sort of vibe. They're trying to just get rid of all this and investigate what happened. They're covering things up. People are just taking flamethrowers to the building as it's being unpacked. We see the body of Seth Brundlefly being put into a body bag and then put into a medical waste box. And then we start seeing all of these trucks, a caravan of trucks leaving this site, driving way outside of the city. And everything's just being dumped in a medical waste plant. We're just getting rid of what we can, burying what we can't. The box containing the Brundlefly's body tips over and breaks open. The bag body falls out, and we hear the buzzing of flies as they descend onto the body and start doing what flies do, decomposing it, eating it, stuff like that. As they eat, they're laying their little larval eggs. We get kind of like a sped up time lapse thing of the body sort of overnight rotting or whatever it does. And then we see the maggots start coming up from the body, the maggot eggs off of the body. And they turn into flies, and they fly up into the night sky, in front of the moon. And we see our title card made of flies, and it says flies. We then Men in Black style sort of follow these flies as they buzz back towards the city, and they land on things. As the moon starts to set, we see, as we're vignetting around through the city to our characters, sorry, I didn't even make up any characters for this. Kurt Russell's probably here. But we notice these flies, as they continue to grow, they're growing to the size of house flies, then to the size of house cats. And they're just getting bigger and bigger. And over the course of about 12 hours, they grow into like mutant fly monsters, like little chuds. Something about that process turns them into these, quickly growing monsters. So they're just tearing through the city throughout the night, fighting everything, killing people. Our characters are organizing and grouping, whatever. And we see the night of them just killing these monsters, just killing them left and right. We don't know how many there are. We don't know what's going on. So they're trying to investigate. They're trying to investigate what's going on. They're following the Seth Brundle trail as they find it. Military gets wind. They're kind of getting involved. We come to find out that each one of these monsters, when they die, if a fly lays their eggs on the body, those larvae, those maggots will turn into future generations of these fly beasts. So for every one that we kill, it potentially could spawn dozens, hundreds of these beasts. So now they know the next night they're going to have even more of these fly monsters. Then the military comes in. They surround the city because there's like patient zero time. They're like, no, whatever's going on in your city has to die in your city or it'll overwhelm the world. So they're getting ready for a countdown to just wipe the city off the map. Anyone who's trying to get out of the city has to fight the military as the military tries to keep them in. And then whichever way it goes, whether our heroes are victorious or not, the military is going to wipe the city off the map. So they blow the city up, smush everything over. Everyone's dead. It's an ending like I love. But then, of course, out of the smoke and the rubble, the camera's going to follow one single fly as it flies up and we get it in front of the moon. And is this a normal fly? Or is it one of the bad flies? Nice. We don't know.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Cool. Thank you.
It's a Alien to Aliens genre jump as well, along with the title.
And if I were to actually sit down and write this script out, I might insert some like garbage guys into the opening scene, and they're the ones like unloading the trucks, and it's like, hey, careful, the box cracked open, and it's like, it's all trash. What do you care? It's not the end of the world.
Perfect.
Awesome.
And I also liked your use of Chud throughout. There's also, Bud the Chud, the sequel. Like that's a famously really terrible movie, I guess.
Great title.
Yeah. Chud 2, Bud the Chud. Yeah.
Well, my fun fact that I have to break up between this and the final pitch is that the movie The Fly 2 was originally given an X rating by the MPAA specifically because of the scene where the security guard's head is smashed by the elevator.
Yeah.
And then the director, Chris Wallace, appealed the decision, and they said, okay, rated R.
Why are the ratings people even there? They seem to
the children
make arbitrary things and they can be swayed.
There's kind of
It's weird to me that the man living through his face being melted off was not mentioned.
Right?
But they were like, oh, you can't just squish a man's head. And then I guess the director went, come on. And they said, get out of here, scamp. Ruffled his hair and sent him on his way.
All right. Well, I'm going to breeze through my pitch as fast as I can, and then we'll figure this out.
As the general said, there's nothing I'd ask you to do that I wouldn't do myself, boys.
Mine is called The Gecko versus the Fly.
Yay!
What?
Nice.
All right. Oh. Veronica has an abortion. Stathis is outfitted with prosthetics. Fake hand, fake foot. Bonded by the overwhelming emotional experience of the first film, they fall back into a relationship. They disagree about what should be done with Ronnie's footage of Seth. Stathis wants to release it. Ronnie wants to destroy it because of her emotional connection to everything. That night, unable to sleep, she rushes out to Seth's lab. She pulls the fire alarm for the building and then proceeds to set the lab on fire. Pulling the fire alarm is just trying to get everyone out. Later, Ronnie winds up pregnant with Stathis's child. They get married. 6 years later, we are brought into the world with a scientific program called The World of Tomorrow Today, in which it is explained that teleportation technology now exists and will soon be implemented around the world by Bartok Sciences to do things like send food and other aid to third world countries. You can become a part of this revolutionary breakthrough today by upgrading your mailbox to a Bart box. Veronica turns off the program with disgust. She and Stathis's marriage has clearly become loveless, and it's fairly apparent that Stathis is having an affair. But Veronica could not love their son, Seth, anymore. We watch her go outside and see that she is the only one on the block with a regular mailbox, but she has no mail and seems frustrated by it. Her neighbor does have a Bart box, but complains that it's all come out printed backwards again, much like the plate in the original Fly. You know, the person that they're with assures them, oh, it's new technology, they'll sort it out eventually. One morning, Veronica doesn't feel well and asks if Stathis can drive Seth to school. He seems put out, but ultimately agrees. That day, it is show and tell, and Seth is bringing his pet gecko to school. Stathis hurriedly drops him off, neither of them noticing that the gecko has escaped its carrying case and is loose in the car. At home, Veronica watches the news and sees that a new innovation in teleportation tech has recently been unveiled. A tunnel that can be walked or driven through that leads straight from, I said New York because that's where I thought they were, but apparently they're in Toronto, so let's just say Toronto, to the island of Oahu. If you wish to drive, you'll have to get your car outfitted with special Bartok tech as well, and the results will be seamless. They call it the Brundle Bridge, named as a tribute to the long-kept secret inventor of the original telepod. Upon seeing this, Veronica freaks out, starts going through Stathis' things, and finds evidence of dealings with Bartok sciences that he's had going on for years. She attempts to call him on his car phone, but he doesn't answer. She leaves him a message saying that she knows what he's done and that he'll never see her or their son again. Stathis, meanwhile, is in a hurry waiting to drive through the Brundle Bridge. He's actively getting texts from his mistress, who is evidently waiting for him on the other side in Oahu. When he reaches the final checkpoint that they're supposed to go through beforehand, he avoids a more thorough search of his vehicle that he probably should have by showing the attendant the alluring picture that his side piece has just sent to him. You know, and the attendant's pervy and is like, oh yeah, get going. Therefore, the gecko, who is hiding under the seat, is missed, and he drives through. Soon thereafter, he starts to change. The first thing that happens is he regrows his hand and foot, which he is very happy about. But then, he begins to grow a tail. He inadvertently kills his mistress by drooling an incredibly viscous saliva onto her during lovemaking, which tears away at her flesh. Then his tongue begins to grow, both in strength and length. His eyelids come off, causing him to have to lick his eyes to keep them wet with his long tongue. He sheds his skin, revealing far more coarse skin underneath. He attempts to call his associates at Bartok Sciences, but finds them overwhelmed and dismissive of his problem, even threatening him if they ever hear from him again. Then he finally listens to Ronnie's message. We jump over to Veronica in a car, driving with Seth in tow. We don't know where they're going, but they're fleeing. You know, they're getting out of town. The inside of the car lights up, and they are suddenly transported by tech that Stathis apparently also had installed into this car, and they end up in Stathis' car in Oahu with Stathis. He holds them captive with no real plan, but he's clearly desperate and slipping into madness, and he continues to shed his skin, becoming more horrifying with each transformation. The teleportation has also had an effect on Seth and Veronica. In Seth, it activates a recessive gene that starts accelerating the process of turning him into a fly. Veronica, too, appears to be going through some painful changes in what appears to be an accelerated pregnancy growing inside of her. Eventually, the two hybrid creatures, the fly and the gecko, fight. With the gecko using his tail, his 12-foot-long tongue, and his sticky finger pads to his advantage. Still, the fly seems to have gained the upper hand until the gecko turns out the lights. This causes the fly to have trouble seeing, while the gecko uses his nocturnal senses to go on the hunt. Just before Stathis destroys Seth, Veronica is able to get the lights back on, overwhelming the gecko's senses long enough to kill him. Desperate to do anything she can to save her son, Veronica puts him in the car and remembers the original Seth Brundle's last-ditch plan to combine their genes by going through the pods together. So Veronica drives the two of them through the Brundle Bridge. Just before she gets to the entrance to the bridge, a fly creature bursts forth from her stomach. They come out the other side, a horrific hybrid creature that loses control of the car, or does it, and drives off the bridge into the ocean. The movie ends with news coverage of this accident and recounts it as one of several terrifying side effects of the teleportation technology around the world, all of which we see glimpses of in the news report. The report goes on to say that all the traces of the tech have been recalled, all the hybrids have been ordered to be destroyed, and Bartok Sciences is facing enormous legal actions after video footage of the original Seth Brundle's experiment, apparently kept secret, have surfaced. And that's it. That's the movie. But I did want to also add on that Jeff Goldblum appears in dreams that Veronica has throughout the film, some sweet, some horrifying. And in the background of most scenes, we see examples of the teleportation tech being used throughout the world. And as the movie progresses, we see multiple hints of other madness going on as well.
I like that.
That's really, really cool.
Why not Brundle Tunnel?
So that it wasn't out of nowhere when the car flies off the thing.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
really,
alliteration.
yeah, alliteration too.
Alliteration.
Both Travis and I wanted to sort of run with the idea of like sort of like a menagerie of different animals. Like both of us thought like spider, like spider person, like.
I very much like the idea that as he sheds his skin, there's a newer monster underneath that's worse.
Yeah.
That's great.
It took me a while to land on gecko. I was originally going with chameleon, but then I found out that they don't regrow their appendages, and I was like, that's got to happen. So
yeah, that's really
Yeah. I thought the viscous saliva killing his mistress during sex is a very Cronenbergian thing.
Yeah, the eyelids falling off I thought would be a crazy thing to see.
I was just trying to picture what kind of gecko effects we would be getting.
Yeah, they'd be practical for sure. I had envisioned, Okay, so I guess let's roll into the voting. I haven't thought of a different way for us to decide this one. Any clear favorites jumping out to anybody?
Mine?
Okay.
I liked them all.
I'll go with yours. I really like the gecko. I just think it's a clever thing. I like it's like what should have happened. It's finding a way to pit like the nemesises against each other. Nemesi?
Yeah.
Nemesis. Yeah, I will vote for Paul's and for mine.
Thanks. I'll vote for all of them. I liked things in all of them. I'm gonna give a four round vote.
Me too. I liked them all.
All right. Well, fuck me. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let's just breeze past counting the votes, and the listeners will know who won.
I think it's time for champagne.
Does anyone have any unsung heroes?
Hit it, Ball Jr.
Unsung heroes.
And Will, to explain what's going on Unsung Heroes, is any small roles or even like extras in the movies that stood out to you as really adding to the overall experience.
Okay. I mean, the scene probably that I remembered most vividly from watching it when I was young was the arm wrestling scene.
Oh, yeah.
So the guy who got his arm broken, I'd say, who I looked up the trivia, and he was like a heavyweight champion boxer, I guess.
Yeah.
He was he was famous in Canada, right?
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, I don't have any for the first Fly because I feel like everybody's pretty prominent in that one. But in the Fly 2, again, referencing what I would say was my favorite scene, where the guy who gets his head vomited on and his head melts.
Yeah,
that security guard, not only because of that, but he's alone. He's the guy who closes the door when the body's thrown at the door. So there's so much cool about that sequence, but you haven't really seen it before. And he gets this awesome line where it's like, he knows he has to go after the creature, and he goes, "Great, fucking great." which is very apt.
Can I vote for the cactus he sends through the?
Oh yeah,
through the pod. Second one, I like that cactus.
Yeah, that was a cool visual. The Cronenberg cactus.
Yeah.
And then I did really, I mean, she is definitely like a major character in the movie, so I wouldn't call her an unsung hero, but I did want to bring up that the female scientist, Dr. Janeway, the first one that he kills in The Fly 2, I want to give her the award for most hateable face.
Wow.
It's just like, I'm not going to say she's an ugly person. And I know that her character was mean, so that's probably leading into it. But from the moment I saw her on screen, I was like, oh, I hate her. I hate her. I hate her. And, that never went away.
Yeah, she was super mean.
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
Well, before we get into plugs and wrapping up, I did want to... I've been waiting to do this episode because I know Will listens to the podcast. I wanted to do a quick, a kind of things left on the table.
Let's get these things off the table.
In the Men in Black episode, I told a story about how when Men in Black 2 came out, I sort of dared all my friends who made fun of the first Men in Black to go see it with me because it would prove that it was good.
Ouch.
And I went myself, even after seeing it the first time and not liking it, I went back 4 or 5 more times to try to make myself like it.
Sure.
So the part of that story that I remembered after the fact and left out, which I think adds a little bit of comedy to the situation, one of those 5 times that I went back, I went with my first ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend. And the feelings there were still very raw, but I was trying to be a nice guy at the time, and I was trying to prove that we could be friends. So we went, and they hated it, and I was still trying to like it. And they made fun of how bad it was after the fact, and I was like, oh yeah, I actually already saw it. And I remember specifically she said to me, oh, so it's like you got kicked in the crotch, and then you asked someone to do it again? And, I was so wrapped up in so many complex emotions, both toward the film and toward them at the time, that I remember my response being, no, that's not what it's like. And that was it.
Oh, bud.
Yeah. So that, yeah, for sure. But further hatred wrapped around Men in Black 2 associated with that situation. So I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you for sharing.
All right. Well, anybody have anything they wish to plug? Will, guest goes first.
Well, best coffee in town. Next time you guys are at the lake, or any of you listeners, Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, look us up. And also, I don't know, I've got a group of people. We've been recording some podcasts that I haven't had time to edit. That is, it's a show called Blast Burton Radar Rocket Ranger from the 26th Century. Eventually, we may release a podcast of serialized episodes, but you can't find it right now. So I don't know if that counts as a plug. It's coming maybe soon. So we've been doing these live performances, for over a year, or we had, until March.
Right.
Why would happen in March?
Also, speaking of that, I assume that Great Stone Coffee is not near the resort in Lake of the Ozarks where the very famous COVID pool party happened.
We are actually. They're like our neighbors.
Oh.
I mean, like they're within maybe like a mile or two of us.
Well, I'm sure it doesn't make the Stone Coffee. That's great.
Right. Well, yeah, we're doing our thing. We have limited seating. We're doing our, we're wearing masks. We're, doing all the stuff. But actually the result it seemed to have had is it showed people took it as, well, they don't care. Let's go there.
Oh.
So we have had a record summer, like over like the whole lake area. Like our normal kind of influx of people is like 7 million, for the season or something. Or maybe it was even 6. And this year we've had something like 9.
Wow.
Already.
Oh man. Yeah.
So we've actually had a significant growth, this year. Significant growth being, the 3rd sequel in my series of Fly movies.
Boy, oh boy, it is. Missouri's it's different.
Yeah, it is different. Yes. Well, even a friend of mine called me from Kansas City, and I told him that, and he was shocked. It's not just Missouri. It seems to be the lake. We live in a weird bubble here.
Yeah, that's scary. But I mean, at least you're being safe.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up, but okay. Sorry. So Travis, Lauren, pluggies.
I got my Etsy shop. I make custom Funko Pops. I take requests. Pop that Funko, and I have a Instagram account with the same name. Periods in between the words. Pop period that period Funko.
Just Theater of Tomorrow and The Hotel, wherever podcasts are sold.
Yeah, Will, have you checked either of those out yet since listening to this?
I haven't.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't.
Well, I think, I mean, first of all, I was asking because I wondered if plugs work, but also, I think you dig them. It's a science fiction anthology show and a horror anthology show, so they're pretty great.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
And I truly have intended to, but I just haven't.
Yeah, you'll love it.
All right, I just now subscribed, so I will no longer be.
Hey-oh! Live plugs work even better, it turns out.
On the next follow-up showdown.
The movie we're talking about is 2015's new horror classic, It Follows. And our guest today is my neighbor, Jason Pugh.
I think it's a safe assumption that every empty seat on an airplane is occupied by an It Follows monster.
That is
and someone tried to say, it's like, whoa, there's something on the sat on someone's lap.